Alright, I'm going to demonstrate how to use the dictionary and list types to get through this grocery list script here with Python. So first thing here up at the top, it does give us this little breakdown as to the different steps. So first part, you need to get user input. The second part, you'll loop through the actual grocery list, and then calculating all the information. And then step 3 is to provide the output to the console. Alright, so first here we'll create the empty data structures. Now the grocery item itself is going to be the dictionary data type. So to specify an empty dictionary, we just use the open and closed curly braces, and that's going to hold our actual item with a few different elements inside of it. And this grocery history variable is actually going to be the full list of dictionary items, and we specify an empty list with the open and closed square brackets. Alright, so basically what this will be a list of dictionary items, and I'll show that to you here a little later. Maybe it'll be a little more clear. Alright, now this here is going to be our loop condition variable. I don't like setting it to a string like this. This kind of makes it a little more difficult to read when stop equals, we're going to set stop equal to go. That doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm going to set this to a Boolean value. So stop equals false. Makes sense? And then we're going to use the value of this variable to determine whether or not we should continue in our loop. So we want a loop will only execute when this condition is true. So if I were to do something like this, while stop, well, we just set the value of stop to false, so it will never enter the loop. So what we want to do is we actually want to figure out if it is not stop, and we can use the not keyword. That'll flip the value of a Boolean. So what this will do is, when this value is false, not false is true. So it's going to when this is true, then it will begin the loop. Right? So first thing here is we need to accept input of the name of the grocery item. So we want to put that into a variable. We'll call it name. You can call it whatever you want, whatever makes sense to you. So we're going to set the value of what is entered here. Yeah, so this is the input function. Basically, it's going to print this value and then get whatever the user types, or in this case what Codio sends through, and it's going to assign it to the variable name. Alright, we're going to do the same thing for the quantity, and we'll call that quantity equals our input value there. Alright, and same thing for the price, or I think they wanted to call it cost. Oops. Equals input. Alright, so now we've got our variables. These are our values coming in from the user. They can enter anything they want, any value here, and that'll be stored in the variable name. Quantity will hold the value of the quantity of items purchased, and cost, if I could spell correctly, this will show this will hold the price of the item entered by the user, or Codio. Alright, so next we need to create a dictionary entry which contains the name. So remember we created this dictionary right here called grocery item. We'll go ahead and just reuse that. We'll do grocery item equals, and the easiest way I think is to just go ahead and what we'll do is we'll define our own dictionary item with the variables that we just received from the user. So we're going to do item name is the name. So what this is doing, we're creating a key value pair here, and the key is item name, and the value is going to be, well, since this is a variable that we just set up here, this will actually be replaced by the value inside name. So whatever the user typed in, if they typed in apple, if they typed in mango, banana, whatever, vacuum cleaner, whatever they enter here is going to be stored in name, So when we run this, it's going to create a dictionary item, and with the value name will be assigned to the key of item name. All right, we need a comma to get our next item, our next element in this dictionary, and that's going to be the quantity. So we'll just call that, we'll give it a key of quantity, oops, and we're going to give that the value of quantity. Now, remember, the input function will always return a string value. Okay, so even though this, what they're typing in is actually a number, it should be anyway. You know, I bought 10 vacuum cleaners. It doesn't matter what they type, it always comes in as a string representation of the keys they typed. So right now, quantity, if we were to, as soon as this ran, if we were to check the type of this variable, it would be a string type. So what we need to do is we need to convert this to a numeric type. Now quantity is always going to be a whole number, it should anyway. Because you can't buy 1.5 of something, so we want to convert this to an integer. All right, and that will just cast the value that is inside quantity into the integer type, and that value is going to be assigned the key of quantity inside this dictionary item called grocery item. All right, we have one more item that we need to, one more element we need to add to the dictionary, so we're going to go ahead and do that. Cost and cost. Okay, now again, cost is right now a string value. Okay, even if they type in 2.78 for $2.78, it's the string representation of 2.78. So we need to convert that to a numeric. And if we were to convert it to an integer, we would lose any of the decimal points in the number. So what we need is a float type. Float is the one that has decimal points. All right, so there we have it. Now this value, grocery item, will contain all the values that were input by the user, and they all are easily referenced by the key that we assigned to it. Okay, so now the next step here is to add the grocery item to the grocery history list using the append function. So they were nice enough to tell you and give you a really good hint on how to do that. So we're going to do grocery history dot append, and then we just pass in our item. As simple as that. So now the grocery history list, the first element, once this happens, it's now going to have an element inside of it. Inside the history. So there's going to be an element inside history, which is actually another dictionary, a dictionary type. Okay. Now I also just want to point out real quick these comments. If you'll notice, they're actually indented differently. They're spaced. The spacing at the beginning is different, and that's actually a good hint as to where the lines of code are supposed to go in order to keep them inside a block. That way, everything in here is run inside the loop on each iteration. Alright, so the next step here, after we have gotten the values and added it to our list, we want to see if the user wants to continue. So we're going to do the same kind of thing here, and we can do something as simple as this. Let's see here, response equals, you can call that whatever you want. And again, we need to get an input from the user. All right, and they should be typing in either C or Q, right? So now what we want to do is we want to check that value to see if they typed in Q. If they type in Q, then we want to stop doing this loop and continue below. So since that requires a decision, we're going to use the if statement. If our response from the user is equal to the value of Q, then we'll set, remember the variable that we're using to control our loop is this variable called stop. So if the user typed in Q, then we're going to say, all right, stop equals true. Yes, please stop. Else, well, yeah, you could do this too. You could do stop equals false. But this part is actually not even necessary because it's already false up here. So if the user does not type in Q, then it's not going to run this line, so stop does not change from false, and it stays at false anyway. So we can just remove that, and this will actually work just fine. So one more time here, if we're going to get this response from the user, if they type in C, or in actuality anything other than Q, then this line will not be run, and the value of stop will not change from false from what it was before. Okay, and then it's just going to go back up to the top. It's going to say while not stop being false. It's going to say while not false, and it's going to do this all over again. Okay, and it's just going to keep adding until the user types in Q. I'll keep prompting them to add the elements to the list until the user types in Q. Once they do that, then the loop is complete. So now we have this little hint here, and again notice that I am lined up with the value, or with the comment here. I have no tabs in the front. That keeps it outside of this loop. If I had it tabbed here, then it would be inside the loop, and it would cause some unwanted behavior. Okay, and I don't want that. So now we're going to define a variable to hold the grand total called grand total. That's simple enough. Grand total. Now because it's a total variable and we're going to be adding to it, we'll start it out at 0. Alright, now we define a for loop, so we need to loop through each of our elements inside our grocery history list. Okay, so I'll copy that here, and so we're going to loop through everything in the grocery history list, and then what we do is we just give it a name that will be the value of each element inside that that list. So I don't know, why don't we call it, we'll just call it item for short. So because each element inside the grocery history was a grocery item, right? So we'll just call it item here. So now we need to calculate the total cost for the grocery item. Let's see here. So we'll create a variable for that if we want to. Total cost equals. Now what we need to do is we need to get the quantity of the item and then multiply it by the cost of the item. And remember, we have the variable name item, which will be a dictionary. So we're going to just reference the value that we're looking for. So we're going to look for the quantity, and we're going to multiply by the cost. All right. Now notice here that I have to specify the name of the dictionary that I'm looking up the key for in both instances. Okay. I can't just leave this off here because, I mean, even though we can read this in English and say, all right, total cost equals the item, the dictionary, and look up this key times this key, right? And you think, oh, well, that must be the same thing here. Python's not that smart. You know, programming languages don't work like that. So you do have to specify each time which dictionary to look in. Right? These keys here tell it what to get, but if you don't tell it where to look, then it's not going to work. Python won't know what you're talking about. All right, so this is necessary. We have to specify the name of the dictionary or list even each time that you are accessing or modifying it. All right, so there we have it. We've got the total cost of this item for each iteration. And then what we'll do is we need to add the item total to the grand total. So we have our grand total, which is up here, and we're going to add to it. So grand total equals our current value of grand total plus the total cost of the item. Okay? So what this is doing is it's taking the current value of grand total, which starts out at 0, adding the total cost to it, so it gets this number, and then it reassigns that value into the variable grand total. Okay? There is a shorthand for this. If you want to spend a little less time typing, you can just do something like this. And that's the exact same thing. It takes grand total and then adds it with this variable and then reassigns it into this. So it's just a little shorthand there. I like to use that because it's a little less typing, keeps the code shorter and a little cleaner. Alright, so last thing, or one of the last things here is to output the information for the grocery item, and it needs to match that. Alright, so this can get a little tricky. I'm going to show you probably the simplest way to do it. Let's see, alright, so we output, which is the print function, okay, and then we want to print, we want to use what's called a format string. Okay, so to do that, we're going to create little placeholders with the percent sign followed by a character. So the percent D for, I don't know, digit, decimal maybe, it's basically an integer. And then we have percent S. So what I'm doing here is I need a 2, that's going to be the quantity value. So I'm creating a placeholder for it inside this string. And then I need the apple, and I'm creating another placeholder for that. And notice the space in the middle, right? This would work too, the only thing is it's not going to have a space then. And the 2 and the apple would be smushed together like that. But since they want a space in the middle, we have to do that here as well. Alright, so 2 apple, and then we need this @ sign, and we can just type that out, because that'll be part of the string. We'll type the $sign, because we want that as well. And now we need a placeholder for the cost, right? And then we're going to do the EA for each, another $sign, and a placeholder for the total cost. Oh, and the F placeholder, the percent F means float. So if you have a decimal point, you need to use this, and you're going to use this format string, then you need to use the F after the parenthesis, after the percent sign. Okay, so that should do it for this. We will have to come back to this in just a minute. I'm going to show you why. Alright, so we're going to set the item total equal to 0, which isn't technically necessary. Item total. And you know what? I'm going to do. Okay, so what I did, it looks like they want the variable called item total instead of total cost. It says here calculate the total cost, so that's why I named it total cost. But looks like they may want it to be called item total. It doesn't make a difference, but whatever you name it here, you have to use later as well. Okay. Oh, and I forgot one very important thing here. So we created this format string and put in a whole bunch of placeholders, which are going to be replaced by values. I just forgot to tell it what values to substitute. So at the end of this format string, notice I am no longer inside the quotations. I'm going to start out with another parenthesis, another percent sign. I don't know why I keep calling it parentheses. Another percent sign, and then since I have more than one to replace, I need to group them inside some parentheses, separated by commas. So this first value that is to be replaced is going to be the quantity, right? So here's how you can access the quantity. Okay, I need a comma. Now I'm going to get the name. So we can do something. We're going to do the same thing. I'm going to get, because we're still inside this for loop, right? So we're still in one iteration. So this item is still the same item that we used up here. Right, so there's our name, and then we need the cost, and we need the total cost of it, which is this right here, item total. Alright, so that should work now. So what this is doing is we're printing, we specify this what's called a format string, and then we put in a whole bunch of little placeholders, which will be substituted for the values outside of the string, but still inside the print statement. Notice here, there's the opening and there's the closing parentheses. Everything in here is all inside this the parentheses of the print. Okay. So each of these values are going to be replaced in here, and it goes in order. So this is the first element in this group of variables, so that will be replaced for the first placeholder. This is the second element in this group of variables, so it will be replaced with the second placeholder, and so on and so forth. You can have as many as you want, but if you don't have enough, if the numbers don't match up, you may get an error. So if you have, for instance, if I've got 4 placeholders and only 2 variables in this group, then it may throw an error, and vice versa. If I have 2 placeholders here and 4 variables, then it won't know what to do, and you'll get an error. All right. So now we can set the total, the item total back to 0. Item total equals 0. This isn't 100% necessary, because what's going to happen is once it gets to the end of the loop and goes back up to the top, it's going to recalculate the item total. So even if you don't reset it to 0, it's going to reset the value here to whatever this calculation is. So this isn't entirely necessary, but we'll leave it in there. That's what they want. It does. We'll just reset it. All right. And our final step here is to just print the grand total. So we'll print, and then what we can do is we can do the same format that I did up here. We'll do the same format string, and this one is going to be, let's see, we want it to say what, grand total, and then have some value here. So it's going to, and we want a $sign, so we have to do %f because it's a float, and then we tell it what we want to replace it with. Now in this case, since I only have 1 placeholder, I don't have to group it in the parentheses. You can if you want to. Some people like to have it in there no matter what, but it's not necessary. Grand total. So that'll work. Okay, so I think this should work. Let's go ahead and run it and see what happens, see what we get. Python grocery this.py. Alright, it's asking for an item name. Let's put something like apple. Quantity, I'll say, oh, you know what, I bought 5 apples, and they were $1.24 each. Would you like to enter another item? Yes, we'll type in C, press enter. Item name, we'll do, I don't know, washer. Quantity purchased, I've only bought 1 today. We'll see about next week. Price was $529.63. Another item, nope, we'll say we're done. We'll type Q, and look at that, I came across an error. Key error name. Oh, exactly. So I have the wrong key in here. Python says, hey, I don't know what you're talking about. Notice how, remember up here we specified it with the key of name, with item name. So we need to use the same key, otherwise it doesn't know what we're talking about. Alright, so let's try this again, shall we? Item name, banana. Quantity, 4 at $1.29 each. I will say yes. I'm going to do vacuum quantity 1 at, I don't know, $228.74. We'll say that's all. There it goes. Alright, so let's see. It prints here, we've got 4 banana at 1.2900. Oh, look at all those extra zeros at the end. Alright, so I told you we were going to come back to that format, and this is what I wanted to point out. So the F specifies a float, and I guess by default, Python likes to print out at least 6 decimal points. So we want to change that. We want it to only do 2 decimal points. So what you have to do is between the % and the F, you just specify with a decimal and then the number of decimal points that you want to display. So 2 will be 2 decimal points. Obviously if I did 4, there'd be 4 decimal points, and so on. You can do as many as you need to. Alright, so that's that one. We'll do that for all of these. .2 and then the grand total as well. Okay, let's try this again here. Item name, apple, about 3 apples at 0.49 cents each. Yes, I bought bananas, 9 of them, at 83 cents each. I gotta do 0.83. And sure, let's do one more item. Ooh, I don't know. A baseball bat. Baseball bat. I bought one of them at $14.88. And we'll say we're done. Quit. So now we have it. There's the 3 apples at 49. You can see it rounded the numbers for me, or it cut it down to 2 decimal points. It does also round it. If you had a lot of decimal points after that, it would round for you. And the 9 bananas at this amount, 1 baseball bat at this amount, and our grand total of $23.82.